All right, we are getting everything up and running here. We're going to start allowing, letting our guests in here today. Welcome everybody, and if you'll bear with us for a few seconds, we're going through all of the necessary starting points here to get this up and running. We are seeing some folks show up. Brandon, Dave, Dean, how you doing? Jason, Jonathan, Lisa, I'm trying to keep up with all the names here. Welcome everybody to the community table session that we have going here today. I'm glad that you're here. We're going to be giving things a couple minutes to allow folks to everybody to filter in. So as you get yourselves comfortable and get a grab your cup of coffee or whatever you need, whatever you're working with today. Okay, so we are officially recording now, and very shortly we will also be going live to Facebook. All right. Oh, and we do have one more guest who's going to be joining us shortly as well. So give me. All right. Well, so I'm going to work on bringing in we do have a third guest business owner joining us here this afternoon, and I'm going to be helping bring her on. But in the meantime, I'll actually, Dean, can you've gotten a chance to chat with both folks. Can you make the introductions here for me?
Yeah, of course, no problem.
Excellent.
Thanks. Well, good to see everybody again this month. And some of you have joined us before, and in the past we've had some community tables where it's just me and Ian just chatting away. Other times we bring some small business owner guests on and have them be part of the conversation. So that's what we decided to do today. So our two guests that are on currently are Laura Fortis and Matt Kruzmark. So Laura, maybe give us your quick kind of 30-second what you do and who you do it for, and introduce yourself to the group, please.
Sure. I have a small market research consultancy called Fortis Consulting, and I do focus groups and surveys for all sorts of businesses, but my specialization is in startups and small businesses in cannabis.
Awesome. Very good. Thanks, Laura. And Matt, give us your little intro, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Matt Kruzmark, a small business owner of K Spatial LLC, which is headquartered in Denver. And I work with a small team of really smart people, and we provide a lot of data infrastructure, data pipelines, kind of data engineering type work to support their kind of ongoing and growing analytics needs. We also specialize in kind of the geospatial and mapping space. That's our kind of niche area.
Okay, good. So we've got two data-driven people here, right? That's great. Awesome. Well, a lot of sales and marketing is data-driven. Well, at least it should be, right? So that's good. Well, we expect one more person to join us, and hopefully she'll be able to jump on here in a few minutes. But we won't wait. We'll get rolling. Ian, do you want me to keep rolling, or are you
yeah, so I did just send Kate Ripp, who is our other panelist as well. She should be joining soon. But what would mark the end of 2020 better than a technical difficulty, right? But and so Dean, you and I were talking a little earlier. We've spent a lot of time, whether it's just you and me talking about these topics, or some version of panel registrants. Oh, and here we have Kate Ripp. Kate, how you doing?
Good. Thank you for getting my text. Somehow the link didn't show up in my Outlook calendar.
That's all right. I'm glad we're glad that you were here. We actually just introduced Laura and Matt here. So Kate, real quick, can you just introduce yourself to the group as well?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kate Ripp, and my company is Mission Critical Teams. We work with business owners who want to grow their business, but they're bumping up against obstacles that are creating some challenges in that growth. And so my programs help them eliminate those.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, and we're glad that the three of you are here to take part in this conversation. You know what we've found through the course of doing these community table sessions is that we have, we talk a lot about the sales marketing aspect of things, and we've talked about the buyer's journey. We've talked about ideal clients, talked about everything from LinkedIn to well, any number of other things to predictable revenue, et cetera, et cetera. But what we decided that we really wanted to focus on was kind of these different stages of the sales funnel, right? And how to really maximize the capacity to move people from one step of the sales funnel to the next, because we all have issues with that. And oftentimes, very often, and I can speak for myself on this, and I'm pretty sure that I can speak for a lot of people on our session here today, that when we find ourselves lacking in new business, our first and immediate instinct is to go find more people, right? Instead of figuring out how to get more out of the people that we have right now. And like I said, I'm the biggest offender of this because I love networking and I love going out and meeting people, and even doing it virtually, I enjoy. But so my first instinct is always to, well, I got to meet more people. I got to get more people. I got to get in front of more people. Whereas I have 5,000 people on my email list, right? That realistically I might be able to connect with, and just not necessarily need more leads, but just need a better conversation. And I think that's really the focus of what we're going to be doing today. So with that, I'm actually going to launch a quick poll here, and I would like to hear from our attendees, which aspects of sales do you struggle with most, right? I mean, we've talked about lead generation, so we actually don't have lead generation as a part of this poll, but we really want to focus on the actual selling of your product, right? Or product or service. Do you struggle with qualifying leads? Is your struggle differentiating yourself from the competition? Maybe dealing with price is an issue. I know that that's something that we've talked about, and again, something that I've struggled with in the past as well. Or just closing deals, right? So you can kind of, it's a multiple choice poll here. So excuse me. And it looks like the vast majority of people have the biggest issue with qualifying leads, and which, Dean, I think this is going to this is going to make an impact. Well, actually, no, I take that back. Closing deals just took the lead. I feel like I'm calling a horse race here. But closing deals took the lead, qualifying leads is second, and then differentiating themselves from the competition is third. So all of which seem to kind of dive really into what we're talking about here today. So Dean, I'll kind of pass it over to you, and you can kind of introduce the conversation a little bit, and we'll start going from there.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for doing that, Polly. And it's always interesting, right? You never know where people perceive their biggest challenge in sales is. And the fact that the majority said closing deals, if I was going to guess on any one, that would be the one. And that's the reason we're here today, right? Is to try and figure out how we can close more deals. And the title of this session is, no, you don't need more leads, but you need to be able to convert more of the leads that you have into revenue. So no big surprise that people that attended are having challenges with closing deals. So that makes a lot of sense. And in all seriousness, if you don't have a well-defined sales process, you're not effective at moving deals through the process, then just adding more leads into the funnel just creates pain and anguish more than anything else, right? It costs you time and it costs you money, and you're not really impacting your ultimate goal, which is to drive revenue. If anything, you're hurting your revenue because you're focused on the wrong thing. So today's conversation will be kind of pretty free flowing. I have a few things that I wanted to just bring up at the beginning to set some context for the conversation. And then we'll jump in and we'll chat with our panelists. And as we go, if anybody in the audience has a question or something they want to cover, is it best to use the Q&A, Ian, for that, or throw it in the chat? What's the best way to do it?
Yeah, I was going to say, you can, if you do have a question, definitely you can do the Q&A and use the Q&A tool inside of Zoom here. And then there might be times when we can maybe pull some people in live as well to contribute if they have questions or thoughts.
Perfect. Awesome. Very good. Well, I know that we've got about 50 minutes left. We'll get rolling, right? So, so I think the biggest challenge is converting that lead into revenue. The biggest challenge isn't doing the work, it's figuring out why, right? Why are you not getting more deals out of the leads that you're creating? And I know most of the panelists at different levels, and nobody's running a high volume business where you're closing 50, 60 deals a month. So it's a much more intimate but high touch sales process. And so every lead that you do create is even more important. So that having that quality conversation and guiding the buyer through the journey of buying is really important. And so we'll get into some of that as we go. But I would say, as I think about why deals don't close to a win, right? You can close deals all day long, but they may be closed lost, which is not ideal. Closed won is what we want, right? So there's 4 or 5 statistics that show up more often than any others. One is just a poor or lack of effective follow-up, and follow-up through the whole sales process, not just responding to a lead, but the long-term sales process. So that's one. The sort of what I call the top of the funnel, the initial qualifying and discovery when a lead comes in, that's often a reason why deals don't close, and we'll get into why that's the case here in a minute. Spending too much time on the wrong opportunities, right? We've all done it. I'm guilty too. You have a friendly, engaging prospect that doesn't mind talking, doesn't mind having meetings, likes to brainstorm, wants to pick your brain. You feel good, but they're never going to buy from you. They're just taking free consulting. And even if they don't mean to do it, that's what they're doing. That's a huge time suck. And it actually takes us off of our task of finding the right individuals that actually will buy. So that's a big one. And that also goes back to discovery. Then the last 2, I would say, would be not doing a really, really good job in differentiating from the competition, and also differentiating from the prospect doing nothing, because that's always a choice too, right? When we're in the B2B sales world, there's always an option for our prospect to just do nothing. And they don't always understand the impact of doing nothing. And it's our job to help them understand that. So that's another reason. And I would say the final one, and it's funny, I had this in my notes, and Laura brought it up when we were chatting before, is us. We kill deals, right? Our confidence in how we sell, how we present price, how we do our thing, right? How we communicate. We're the biggest deal killer of them all. So we'll try and touch on some of these things as we go through. So that's what I think are the top 5 things why deals don't get closed. So that's the first thing that we'll get through. The other thing I wanted to bring up, just from a context perspective, is if you're going to look at each piece of how you sell, if you could pick one thing that's going to have the biggest impact on results, what would it be? And if you can define that, that's where you spend time improving your proficiency. And Salesforce did a study. Salesforce has access to billions of bytes of sales data. And they look at lead to opportunity as one kind of ratio, and then opportunity to winning a deal as a second ratio. And they have big companies that use Salesforce and small companies that use Salesforce. But the moral of the story here is that on average, only 13% of leads convert to opportunities, and only 6% of opportunities convert to deals. That's like a 1% closing rate from lead to close. That's really, really low. And so I believe that focusing on opportunity to deal activity is where you can really leverage your time. So if you've done a good job qualifying and disqualifying, and you've got legitimately qualified opportunities, opportunity to deal is where we need to spend our time improving our performance. And you can have a exponential impact on your bottom line when you do that. So there's some context for you guys. The goal here now is to sort of switch gears a little bit and maybe open it up to the panelists, and maybe tell us a little bit where you think your biggest gap in your selling proficiency is. So Laura, you and I talked at the beginning with Ian. tell us a little about where you struggle the most with selling.
I'd say most of my struggle is in the closing the deal, but the psychological aspects of it really. I want to, there's an idealistic part of me that wants to be able to make my product or service available to everybody. And in doing so, I do myself a disservice financially because I diminish the value of my product if I decrease the price or say, hey, I know you can't afford it, but you really need market research. So I'm just going to give this to you anyway. I'm just, my idealism and my financial astuteness do not align all the time. And so that's where probably my biggest challenge is I need an agent or a Cyrano de Bergerac to tell me what to say in my ear. So if you have a solution like that, I'm really all ears.
Yeah, I think that's a really a good example, right, of where we struggle. And many small business owners, you're in sales by situation and not by choice, right? If you could say, I'm just going to shop that out. I'm going to have somebody come in and do all my selling for me. Let me just do my thing. You'd be happy. I've got clients that have said that to me very recently, right? So, but that's not always the case. We can't always be in that situation. So, the what's between our ears, that limiting belief, that limiting thought process comes through in everything that we do and say, right? And so I would say the first thing is you can overcome your internal belief about what they can afford or what they're willing to pay, which may be two different things, in a high quality discovery process, right? So I'm a big believer, you're a marketing researcher, you get this, right? The narrower your niche, the higher impact you can have, right? You can't be all things to all people. It doesn't work. And so actually narrowing your niche actually improves your ability to message and align and have impact with your audience. So if you are targeting people that are low budget folks, then you're going to get low budget opportunities. And so be allowing yourself to maybe even market upstream intentionally and give yourself the ability to say no, because if you're clear on your niche, it's really easy to say no to everything else, right? But if you want to help all small business owners, it's hard to say no to anybody. And so I see you smiling, right? Hopefully this is resonating. Develop your niche, get really clear on who that is. And the narrower it is, the scarier it feels, but the more effective it will be.
Dean, one of the things that struck me, and I'm going to be your Ed McMahon today, and for anybody that remembers the Tonight Show, the original Tonight Show, but so one of the things that struck me specifically about what you were saying earlier is that with the discovery process, so somebody in a company like Laura's, that market research, right? It's very, it's something that people probably think they can do it themselves, right? Well, I can go into SurveyMonkey too, right? Why should I hire somebody else to do it? And Laura, I'm guessing that you've gotten that conversation, I'm guessing you've heard that before, right?
Oh yeah, it's like a knife in my
Right.
heart.
So I guess I'm wondering, because, and then you mentioned the people that are always in that kind of just constant discovery phase, where then they're cool hanging out with you and spending time with you. And, I remember moving from New York to San Diego. That was something that I really had to understand, that just because I was going surfing with somebody that I thought was a potential client didn't mean that they were actually interested in doing business with me, right? They were just wanted to pick my brain. And so how do you kind of shift that discovery to really to get more pointed into the qualifying of leads and kind of get them to that next stage where they're actually considering doing business with you without being kind of a jerk about it and saying, okay, seriously, if you're not going to pay me for this, I used to make a joke about it saying, well, I'll get you to a point where you're paying me eventually. Don't worry about it. Right.
Yeah.
But
it's really good. I think we've all been in that trap, right? So I think discovery to me is there are 2 or 3 layers to it. The first is, certainly do they have a need that we can help solve, right? If they're looking for, a roofer, I'm not the guy. So it's just not a fit. So you obviously at the high level, do we offer the general services that they think they need? So that I think that's just a general no-brainer. But one of the questions I'll ask, if I feel like this is a kind of a DIYer, right? They can do it themselves. I'll ask questions about who have you hired? What other outside professionals have you hired before for other services, and how did it go? Right? If they've never spent money beyond maybe getting their taxes done on outside service providers, what's the odds of you changing that trend?
Yeah.
Probably pretty low, especially if they're a small business owner that's, you know, wearing the multiple hats. So for me, that's a quick disqualifier, because they don't even know what it's like to spend money on professional services. They've never experienced it. And so you come in with a, you know, a decent amount of money request, that's a really hard sell. And I would move them on, or send them to somewhere where they can learn how to do it themselves. Great. So then the next round, when they realize they didn't get what they needed out of their own, you know, efforts, they can come back perhaps. But there's always someone you can refer them to, or a resource you can send them to. So you're not just saying no, you're giving them another option. But to me, that's a really easy one. If they've never spent money on professional services, that's where I would start in that situation.
And you can always sell like courses and things like that to that, you know, hey, if you want to learn how to do this on your own, here's a step-by-step walkthrough of how to do it. Right. I mean, there's countless people who do that as both a lead generator and as just a kind of an out for folks like that.
Yeah, for sure. Because, you know, I think, you know, adding value, you can add value in so many different ways. So that to me is one level of doing it. The other is, I think we sometimes get too caught up in the issue that they're describing, and then what we think our solution is. And we don't spend enough time on the impact of that issue with the client, right? So they need more data for something, right? What's the impact around that? Right? Get them to talk about the impact and not try and self-diagnose the problem, right? It's the old doctor. You don't go into the doctor and say, "Doc, I've got a pain here," and he says, "Here's a pill." He diagnoses. He doesn't talk about the location of the pain necessarily, but all the things that surround it. So we tend to spend a lot of time, we do a quick trying to understand what they need, and then we jump right into a solution. And we often are diagnosing the wrong pain. So spend some time talking about the impact of this issue. And again, maybe even it's the impact of if they do nothing. And if there's a low impact for doing nothing, why would they spend money? Especially if they're not used to spending money. So those are some of those sort of like general discovery questions or approaches you can take to sort of quickly, hopefully, get the tire kickers out the way so you can spend time on higher probability opportunities.
You know, so Tim asked a question here in the chat, specific to qualifying. Do you use any or do you recommend any qualifying systems like the BANT system to get them to kind of maybe get off the dime and, you know, tell you if they're willing to spend it?
I think BANT, there are some elements to BANT. So BANT is budget, authority, need, and timing. It's a little bit of, I think it's a bit of an older way of approaching qualifying. It depends, right? If you're dealing with a large organization with lots of levels of authority and budget and decision makers, then that sales approach is different. But if you're selling into small owner-operator businesses, family-owned businesses, you're probably dealing with the decision makers, right? Or very close to that. And so the assumption is, you don't want to make assumptions, but you need to understand what's the process for them evaluating a solution. How do they evaluate it? Who's involved in that evaluation process? And ultimately, how do they make a decision? Right. So that's not truly BANT, but there are pieces of BANT that are involved in that. And that last piece, how they make a decision, is really important. Because most of the people that we as a group of sort of service providers sell to, our prospects, our customers aren't experts in buying our stuff. Right? They're experts in their thing, not our thing. And so we have to guide them through the process and help them make an educated decision and guide them through the process of making a buying decision. And so authority is important. Budget's less important, because if your services can deliver $1 million in measurable value and you charge 20 grand, budget's irrelevant, completely irrelevant. So budget is a crutch for us to discount as salespeople. And it's a great thing for a prospect to hide behind. Well, we don't have budget for that. Okay, so if you've done a good job in describing the value is $1 million and they agree to that, maybe they even told you it was $1 million and your fee's 20 grand, budget's irrelevant. So that's why BANT is I don't like BANT for that reason. Need and timing come in the conversation too. So,
you know, one of the things that I kind of pulled from that helps to kind of that I would imagine anyway would help to shift tire kickers into self-qualified buyers or no is identifying it as a decision, right? So the one thing out of the BANT thing, the BANT that BANT strategy, seems like the most important aspect of it is to identify authority, because you're identifying the fact that this is going to be a decision that you're going to have to make. Right. So when Laura is talking to the owner of a cannabis company or whomever to actually, and to determine, hey, this is what's going to happen. And this is what I think, this is what I think they need. This is what I think they're telling me, what have you. And she says, well, you could do market research for that. And instead of answering questions about what those are, kind of shifting the conversation to kind of a more clear, this is going to be a decision thing. Is this something that you're going to decide, or whatever? And I would imagine that it would shift it into a sales conversation. Does that seem accurate?
Yeah, I think that's the going back to how they make decisions and who's involved, right?
Right.
And asking those questions. We've all run across that thing where we thought we're right there at the finish line and they say, I need to run this by somebody else. And you're like, you didn't even know that person existed, but you probably didn't ask. How do you even go about making these kinds of decisions, Ian?
Yeah.
Ask the question directly. It's okay. Right. You're not creating an objection. You're actually flushing out hidden objections that come down the road. So I think that sometimes we get afraid to ask some direct questions like, what do you think this is going to cost you? Right. A little bit tongue in cheek, you can smile when you say it, but put money on the table. It's okay to talk about money early on and not once you put a proposal in front of them. And we'll get to proposals in later in the conversation, but the proposal should never be the first time they see price.
Right.
Absolutely a deal killer every single time.
Yeah. Kate, you had looked like you had something to contribute here.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Dean was saying, and what I've learned to do is I have quite an extensive discovery process. And when I've gone through that, and I'm pretty clear about the solution, my next thing is I've heard what you said, feedback to me. If this is accurate, they say yes, I say great. I think that we can help. I have found, this is what I say to them, I have found, though, that talking to others in your decision circle can be really helpful, because before I present a solution to you, they're going to have different needs and perspectives. Will you make an introduction for me so that I can talk to them? And almost always it's yes, but if it's no, I'm done. If I can't get in front of the other people that I know are going to be in that conversation, then that informs me how to be working with that client. And I have just learned to walk away from that. That one took a while, though.
Absolutely.
That's a good one. Yeah. So they're creating barriers for you to have that more substantial conversation with everybody that's involved in the decision-making process. So I think that's a really, really great question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Matt, we talked a little before the call a couple of days ago, and it seems like a lot of your leads come from referral. Is that right?
Right. Or just people I know that I've known for a long time. So.
Yeah, exactly. So they probably already know kind of what you do. So it would seem like in your situation, you're not necessarily having to explain the benefits of what you do as much as why us. Is that a fair assumption, or is it a little different?
Yeah, or I might meet them through another client that invited me to a conference to speak or something like that back in the days when you could get together at conferences. So a few clients that way as well. But generally, I spent the first 10 years of my career very hands-on, and I spent the next 10 years of my career leading teams of really smart people, but typically small teams. And then now for the last 4 years, I tried to combine those two things And so for me, the very last thing that I want to do every day when I wake up is try to meet new people to sell to.
Hey, man. So when you think about your sales process, where do you feel like you could use improvement in converting that introduction, that referral into a paying customer?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that you guys have discussed already have resonated with me. So being able to demystify things a little bit more would be good. So my messaging, again, I don't think that I'm giving my a messaging of what we do enough to really continually refine it. Also, Dean, your comments about niche really resonate with me. And so, we've done some really great work with clients over the last 4 years. And typically once we work with them on the smallest of small projects, then we're with them for years. And I love that. But these aren't typically, the clients that we work with are very much like we are. They're scrappy. They might, they're sort of maybe in their industry to complement what they want to do with their life. They might be very community driven, not so much profit driven and things like that. And so I tend to gravitate towards those folks. I do gravitate towards entrepreneurs as well. And we've worked with several entrepreneurs, but we've never landed that big, huge corporate client, which sort of makes sense because I've never worked in a big, huge corporate environment in the 25 years I've been doing this. So,
Right. So we do, like attracts like in some ways, right? And I think that's a good thing, because if you identify with that, then, I think life's too short to work with people you don't like and trust.
Sure.
And the buyers, they feel that too. Sometimes they don't verbalize it, but they feel that too. So it sounds like a lot of your conversation is around sort of like this impact, the vision or the purpose as well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like the other thing that resonated with me was when you said something like that the budget doesn't matter. I do feel like the consulting work that we do provide in creating data infrastructure and data engineering processes for folks it's a game changer for them. It's really, if they do spend $20,000 with us just to start with on a very small project, I honestly believe they're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars of value out of that in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
But it's difficult for me to verbalize and analytically assess that ROI that I really truly believe is there. And I think, many of our existing clients would probably come back later and say, yeah, we're glad we did this with these guys because it was a game changer for us.
Yeah. So there's an objection hidden in this somewhere, right? How do we quantify or justify the ROI? And I think there's a couple of approaches to that. One is, if I'm the sales guy, right, and I say, you're going to get X ROI, it's like, yeah, right, whatever, you're the sales guy. There's no way I believe you. And so using those testimonials, if you can get a client to document, case study, the tangible, measurable return on investment, then it's not you saying it, it's somebody else saying it, and it's a hell of a lot more believable. And even better than that is guiding them through a conversation where they come to a quantifiable conclusion. Going through the process, explaining the outcomes, the impacts and results of what you do, and getting them to tell you what they think the value is of those services. That's the ultimate situation, right? Because they've just said it themselves.
Right.
And then you can tie your conversations back to that. And then the price conversation changes completely, because then it's a case of the more coins you put in the slot, the bigger the outcome will be for you. And they can make that correlation because it came from them and not from you. So as you have those discovery and sort of middle of the funnel sales conversations around potential solutions and so on, turn the conversation back on them, put it back on them, because if they can't even imagine what the outcome would look like or the results and the impacts of your services, then you're not aligned. They don't understand what you do. But if you can get them to start to talk about it themselves and walk through that future state, that's when you've got a situation where you can really move the deal through the conversation quickly. I think that's a big piece, is also getting them to think about current state and future state. And you're filling in the gap to get in there. And what does that future state look like, feel like? How are they going to measure it? That's where you want the conversation to be focused on. And then this sort of like magic that you do in the middle is somewhat less important because they know they're going to get to the result that they can measure. So,
Okay, thank you.
so Kate, you had a couple of great ideas a few minutes ago, but where do you struggle the most with your sales process?
Well, there are, well, let me count the ways. Um, the first one, though, I'm getting better at this. I get networking, building relationship fatigue, especially now that I'm doing more on LinkedIn. I know my niche. I'm crystal clear on that. I've got a solid sales process, but it's just, I wonder how many opportunities I'm overlooking because it's like, oh my God, somebody does want to connect and have a conversation with me. And I've just gotten kind of fatigued about that. That's one thing. The other thing is that constant discovery phase, as Ian called it. I'm recalling one over the summer. This guy so needs me. This company does. And I'm a coach. Right. So my whole thing is about getting them to think differently about their business. And I always want them to have value, whether they choose to hire me or not. Well, after 5 or 6 hours, him kept saying, my dad has to be in the conversation. Great. Let's get your dad in the conversation. It just went on. And I finally just said, you're not ready to move forward. This is just not the right timing. Could have gotten there a couple of hours sooner. But the final one and the real big one that I struggle with is matching value to cost. And so, Dean, as you're putting it, putting it back on them, what do you think this would be worth to you? That would be really helpful for me to be in that mindset and confidence of having, 2 or 3 questions that I could pose to them to get them to that place. Because once they're there, then I think I would feel comfortable or confident in talking about price.
Yeah, yeah. One of the ways I like to approach that is if they're struggling with sort of managing this concept of tangible value, you can ask a question like, let's assume we move forward with this. 6 months from now, we're going to look back on this conversation, and I'm going to say to you, Kate, my new client, was this successful? And you're going to give me a yes or no answer. But what are you going to base that yes or no on? How will you know 6 months from now that what we're doing is successful? And that changes the concept of return on investment because we're not there yet, right? So they may say in your case, well, we're going to have a much more aligned team. We're going to have clearer goals and visions to get to that next level of growth. We're going to have a plan in place, right? So those are the things that they're going to measure that are successful. And it had nothing to do with growing sales or adding employees or reducing turnover. So you have to ask that question because that also helps give you a sense of where they're at. So if you can get them to describe what success looks like, then the follow-up question is, how will that success impact your business? How are you going to measure the impact of that success on your business? Right. So now you start to quantify. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, if we do this, we can reduce turnover. Turnover is costing us X amount of dollars every year. Now you've got some numbers you can talk about. Then it brings it back down to something much more tangible. You start with this sort of big picture. How do you measure? What does success look like? Impact and measurements around that. And then you can get to some more quantifiable things. So that process works quite well because I don't think a lot of times people know how to respond to what's your expected ROI? It's this artificial question that nobody knows how to measure. So that journey might help them. A lot of that conversation may help them.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So we've talked sort of generally about some challenges in sales. While price didn't come up in the poll, and it's sort of come up in this conversation, I actually think price has a bigger impact on our confidence in selling than we realize. And so I thought we could just chat about price for a minute, right? So, budget, price, value, all of these things have an impact between our ears as salespeople, right?
1 square foot of real estate, right?
Right. The most valuable and underutilized, right? It's all about our personal beliefs around money personally, and also value, our personal value, the value that our services bring. And the number one crutch that salespeople use is discounting, right? If I'm working with a sales team and we allow some discounting, they will use it, guaranteed, every time. But if you put some kind of gate in there, some levels of authority, they have to go get a permission to use a discount, then they tend to not use it as much because it's not worth the hassle. They're just going to try and sell it and move on. But as business owners, we give ourselves permission all day long to discount because we think they can't afford that thing. And so we subconsciously discount, we cut our price, and then the prospect asks for a discount and we give them a little more, and we got a client, and then we say, crap, I just totally undersold myself. It happens every day. We've all done it. And so I believe that if you followed some of the things we've talked about and you present the cost is the cost, right? Doesn't matter if it's more or less than they thought. So one of the responses often is you deliver your even if it's a range, and this is one technique I like to use, I'll give them a range, a really wide range. But the lower end of that wide range is still close to my actual price. Because if you give somebody a range, which end of the range do they remember?
The low end.
The low end every time. So let's say the range is 15 to 30,000 bucks, and I know my price is about 15 grand. You get to see what their reaction is, right? You're not guaranteeing anything, but you get to see their reaction. If they say, well, I've only got 5,000 bucks to spend, then you can have a scope conversation. But when they say that's more than I thought it would be, there's a really big difference between that's more money than I can spend and that's more money than I thought it would be. The first is a real, assuming they're not lying, that's a real thing that you have to deal with. They don't have the money to spend. The second is I thought it was more, that's more than I thought it would be. That's not a no. That's not a no. And that's not an instant, oh, I need a discount. The response to that is okay. Okay. Let them react to you. Don't react to them. So if you've done a good job in understanding value and all of those things, you've presented your price with a range to get their reaction, then you have a place to have a conversation from, right? And
I think that's I think that's a really important point to remember, is letting them actually, especially when you're having a conversation with a prospect, because, when we get uncomfortable, all of us, well, almost all of us talk more, right? And so I had it's interesting that you bring that up, because I remember I had a sales coach one time that said, all right, if you, it was a sales manager, I'm sorry. So I was sitting next to him, and he's like, okay, now you have to say the price and then just shut up. And if you talk before they do, you're fired. And I'm like, whoa, I'm like, that seems drastic, right? But and it was the most uncomfortable. Well, it felt like 10 minutes, but it was probably actually about 25 seconds before they finally said, okay, let's move forward. Right. And, but we tend to buy back the farm. Right. I mean, we've that phrase has been around forever, and so I've seen that over and over again. So letting it kind of soak into them and making it very clear that you're the next one to say something is an important thing.
yeah. Versus my price is X, but if that's too much, we could do something.
Right.
In the same sentence, in the same breath. Right. Which is what most people do. Mm-hmm. So just that confidence, the thing about presenting price, it has to align with the scope. And so it becomes this conversation. And my clients have heard me say this, even when I get to that point of developing a scope of work or a proposal, a lot of times I'll put draft right on the top of it, even if it's confirming all the things we've already talked about. And the reason it's a draft is it gives the prospect the opportunity to discuss it. It's not a yes or no, a go or no go, a black or white. It's a discussion. Because if we really have to reduce the price, let's see what we need to do to cut some scope. Mm-hmm. If we don't cover everything in the scope that they expected, we can do that, but it would increase the price. Mm-hmm. So it goes both ways. So there's there's steps to this process in presenting price, but it really comes down to, like I said, between our ears. But
Yeah, right.
Black or white.
So we talked a little bit about, and one of the things that we did discuss about this session today was this pretty powerful method that you've developed called the Theta method. And I do have a blank PDF version of the Theta method that I can share with everybody. If you give me the thumbs up on that, Dean, I'll push it out. So to all panelists and attendees, you'll see in the chat, there is a link to a download, and you can click on that link to download the PDF version of this Theta method and excuse me, and kind of talk through and follow along as we go through this, because a lot of what we've talked about and today, Dean, kind of comes back to the reason that from what it seems to me anyway, the reason that you kind of created this, because it kind of covers a lot of these things right off the bat, right?
Yeah, for sure. So this came out of an ongoing exercise with a client. They were a software company, and they sold into a really competitive marketplace. Their end user customer was or is retail, the large retail chains, restaurants, hospitality. You know, a lot of those are struggling right now, but nonetheless. So that was their selling environment. And what we found was the business development folks were doing a pretty good job qualifying. They were doing a pretty good job sort of guiding the sales process, but the wheels fell off sort of lower down in the sales conversation, where they were really getting into the weeds. They were trying to differentiate from the competition and trying to explain kind of the secret sauce of what we did versus the other guys. So that's where the Theta process came from. And so Theta stands for, the T is their after state, the prospect's after state. The H is how we do it. How do we deliver our value? The E is explain how it's better. The T is tell a proof point. And the final letter, the A, is ask a trap set question. And we'll spend some time on trap set questions because that's a tough one. It's a tough thing to hone that skill and really understand it. But why don't we do this? Ian, you and I have talked about this prior to the call. Yeah. We can kind of walk through this, and you'll be my guinea pig here.
Yeah, and I can actually share my screen. I've got my kind of working, excuse me, my working document up here as well.
Awesome, perfect. Yeah. So let's for the audience's sake, I'm assuming that most people know what Mission Suite is, but let's just tell the audience what Mission Suite is so they understand.
Mission Suite is a CRM and sales automation software platform, uses automation and email marketing and full bore CRM as a tool to help drive sales efforts forward for sales teams, business owners, and salespeople.
Awesome, thank you. So as you're talking to the prospect, the goal is for them to get somewhere. There's an accomplishment, a goal with buying some kind of CRM. So in this particular example, what's the after state, the future state they're looking for?
Yeah, so in this one, I was, and of course we have a number of different client profiles that we pursue, and each one has their own strategy behind it. But you know, in this one, I was imagining talking to sales managers, VPs of sales, people who are leading sales teams, 5-10 people, 5-10 person sales teams, and their frustration is that it's as a sales leader. And, you know, raise your hand if you've ever been a sales leader and have experienced this. It's next to impossible to get your salespeople to use your CRM unless you make it a mandatory requirement of, you know, you're being rated on this on a regular basis, right? So it's really challenging to use it because salespeople often find it to be more of a hindrance. So the conversation here is going to the VP of sales to basically say, listen, by using Mission Suite, you will end up with better insight into your sales forecast and salespeople's activity with a more effective sales organization and more revenue because your salespeople are going to be using this thing. Right. I mean, it's a more, because they'll actually, their after state is they have people who are actually using the system to put in their information, and I'll talk about all the other stuff, but that's the after, right? And so they're going to get better insight into what's going on in the sales side of the business.
So their after state is high adoption, right? People who use the system. There's all these benefits of why and the outputs, but we all know data in, data out, right? So that's the after state is high user adoption, right? Your reps will find it easy to use, and therefore we use it. Now, there's other components to that like training and so forth, but nonetheless, that's the desired out, the after stage. So, so as you represent Mission Suite, you need to be able to demonstrate that this thing is easy to use. Now, the fact that it's software is pretty handy, right? You can show.
Right.
If you're a services business, it's a little different. So maybe there would be a case study or an example or a testimonial that you can use. But in your case, how would you show it's easy to use?
Well, we give a full demo of the system, usually 45 minutes to an hour of actually spending time in the system, showing people, kind of right off the bat, hey, listen, your salespeople can work straight from the dashboard and still power all of your automation, still power all of the reports that you need without having to go to do a deep dive into it, right? So that's typically what we show, and then we kind of we dive a little bit deeper into the functions of it. So.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the things to keep in mind, especially with something like Mission Suite that has tons of functionality, right? I'm a user of Mission Suite, love the solution, but there's lots of stuff in there, and I learn new things all the time, which is awesome. But that can be overwhelming to a prospect, right? And so in the after state discussion, if you can find out specifically where the barriers are for use, what are the things that the salespeople hate the most, and show how those few things are super easy to use, that leads you to that deeper dive conversation. Because at the end of the day, they want to focus on the things that they care about the most. You may think this feature Z is so cool, but they don't care about it right now. They care about dashboard, entering leads, and follow-ups, for example. So I would say that sort of initial demo should be super high level, but it focused just on the few things they care the most about. And then go to that deeper dive, because otherwise it can be overwhelming.
Right.
Makes sense? So you've got some bullet points there on what you would say to describe the ease of use, for example, right? Okay. So then how would you explain that Mission Suite is better than the competition? You showed it, you've talked about those features, but how would you explain that in a bigger context?
Well, so what I have here is that Mission Suite has a number of tools that salespeople can use to streamline, yada, yada, yada. But really what it comes down to is that, they're going to see value out of it, and they're going to see pretty quickly how it can help them close sales, how it can help them set meetings, build relationships, and nurture relationships using that automation. Because even if you're using a spreadsheet, we can meet you where you are, and and connect your spreadsheet to it, so you can keep using your spreadsheet, but your prospects are still going to get automated emails from you, and you're still going to get a reminder to go and give them a call a few days later. So as salespeople start to see that and realize, oh, this is actually pretty helpful, then all of a sudden, salespeople, what I found in my life anyway, is that salespeople use anything as long as it's going to help them actually close deals. Totally. Right. And so it doesn't matter what you're using, we can probably connect to it, get you set up with it so that your salespeople can actually get the job done.
Cool. Awesome. Well, and one thing to keep in mind is that we're at that point in the sales process where we should have already asked the question about competition. So we know who we're being compared to. So in your world, you may be compared to any number of CRM, Salesforce, Zoho. I mean, the list goes on and on. And I have no doubt that you've got a matrix on your website that shows the differences between. And so when you start to explain how it's better, it's not just how it's better against the current state, but it's also how it's better against the competition. So you start to build seeds of doubt about the competition right there. So now you move on to the proof point. So again, the beauty of software is you can show, right? It's demonstratable. But as you think about the proof point, breaking it into sort of like their current challenge and how we're going to approach the solution, that's how we break proof point up. You're going to restate the challenge in some ways, right? So how did you approach that?
So this was really a case study, right? I had a client that manufactures and sells modular flooring. They were looking for a CRM that their team could learn and work with pretty easily. right? That, I mean, they were using QuickBooks as the CRM before they came to Mission Suite, which was an interesting interesting deal. But so kind of, and then talked about the fact that when we, and of course, I'm long-winded, so it's a longer thing here, but we implemented Mission Suite, and then we're able to train them on its use and how the automated lead distribution flow worked, and how the salespeople got the alerts and all those things. And as a result, they've actually grown their team, and they have a bunch of users on Mission Suite now, but they're not, but again, and they've been able to reinvest what they would have spent for a per user system like a Salesforce or Zoho, and because since we don't charge in that manner, we were able to save them a bunch of money. So now they were able to put it back into marketing efforts and grow that too. So
you got tangible example. It ties right back to their challenge and their desired outcomes as well. Good.
So Robin here asked an interesting question that kind of brings us back to the after state aspect of this, and I think it's worth bringing up. He was asking if we think that prospects are usually clear about what they actually want their after state to be, or do they really do they seem to really actually understand their problems, or are they just reacting to symptoms rather than addressing the cause?
That's a good question. And not surprising that Robin came up with a good question. I would say usually they have a general sense of what they want the future to look like. But that again goes back to it's your responsibility to walk them through that journey, get them to thinking and imagining and verbalizing what the future state looks like. And the place to start is get them to talk about the current impacts of this problem. Right? That's a place to start the conversation from. And then as you start to bring them into the future and we talk about how we're solving the problem and how those impacts change from a negative to a positive, then they get to think more clearly about the future. But generally speaking, it's a very general hope for the future, right? Yeah. We want to grow this thing. I hear that from business owners. We want to grow our business. Okay.
Great.
1% or 1,000,000%, right? Right. So no, that's part of our job is to walk them through that process, get them to think about the future, because sometimes the self-diagnosis by the business owner is wrong. Right? They think they know the problem. They have a sense of where they want to be in the future, but they're completely on the wrong track. Right. So your job as the doctor, right? You have to help them diagnose correctly so that you can get to that future state of health.
Yeah. So we've only got a couple minutes left here. So let's kind of talk quickly about the trap set question, and maybe we can, if we have questions, maybe we can get Dean to record another video, and we can distribute that to everybody who's still got questions or something.
So we'll hit trap set questions very quickly, but it's a complicated, difficult thing to really sort of wrap our head around. The concept of a trap set question is to ask a question that leads your prospect to answer in such a way that they qualify you in and disqualify the competition out, right? So in this particular case, where the trap set question is around their requirement, and their requirement is an easy interface for their reps to use, easy to use. So that's the requirement that we're going to trap set the question around. And in essence, the question is something like, well, I know you've looked at Salesforce and that's one of your top candidates for CRM. How easy do you think it will be for your reps to really adopt Salesforce, right? It's totally a loaded question, but you want the prospect to say, you know what, Salesforce is awesome. It has a lot of bells and whistles, but you're right, it is difficult to use. Or it costs tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to make it easy to use. You want them to talk about that stuff. And so you've asked a question around a requirement, a feature, a solution that you offer that the competition doesn't offer or is weak at. So you have to know who you're being compared to and what their after state is all around. Then you just ask a question, just bring it back up, because what will happen is if you don't, they'll have forgot it. The prospect will have forgotten that this was a requirement our solution provider has to have, but they said it 6 weeks ago. So you ask a question around that requirement that aligns you with their goals and hopefully disqualifies the competition. So that's what the trap set question is all about. And it can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, I love it.
Very quick cover, but and we're at the top of the hour too. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you know, we do definitely want to be respectful of everybody's time here. So we will have to cover the trap set a little bit more, and I think it'll be interesting to kind of do a deeper dive into discovery too, you know, and kind of maybe some more tactical conversations about that. So coming out of this into some next conversations. But as we wrap up, Laura, Matt, Kate, thank you all so much for being here today. It was great having you, great chatting with you. Dean, as always, thank you. It was awesome. You know, I think we're gonna have like I said, I think we'll definitely have some more interesting conversations coming out of this. And to everybody who was able to join us today, thank you so much. This was recorded. It was live on Facebook, and it will be up on YouTube shortly as well. So with that, I will say thank you so much. Everybody have a great afternoon, have a great holiday season and a great new year. And and we will talk to you. We'll see you in the new year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye.
Cheers, everyone.